We started 2 weeks ago with a webinar dedicated to villas on the lakes of northern Italy. And we have an interesting program. We will dedicate future ones to abbeys and monasteries, art collections, castles and their frescoes, and finally one on unexpected treasures. All properties that are part of our heritage, which FAI opens to the public for everyone to enjoy, because they belong to everyone. Because this is exactly what FAI does. We restore architectural and landscape properties with the help of individuals and corporate sponsors, and we organize visits and events to attract our public. British people are familiar to this because it is the same model of the National Trust. In fact, we were founded 45 years ago, following its example. Our founders strongly believe that Italy's culture and our distinctive landscape, so admired by people from all over the world, deserve to be protected, shared, and enhanced. Our members and supporters help us in making this possible every day. And now a few technical recommendations. This event will last around 40-45 minutes. There's a Q&A button that you can use. We might not have the time to answer all your questions today, but we will do so right after. So we will also publish on Facebook a recording of these webinars. So in case you missed the last one, you can watch it on our Facebook page. And now I would like to invite Catherine Treadwell, a passionate FAI UK trustee, who joins us from London. Hello, Catherine.
Buonasera, Alessandra. Buonasera.
Buonasera. Buonasera, and thank you for joining. I would like you to share with our guests the reasons why you chose to support FAI and be a trustee of FAI UK.
Well, it's a great privilege. I was one of the early trustees and I'm a supporter. And I've been going to Italy since I was very small, regularly. I have a passion for the art and architecture. And now it's wonderful to feel that I'm part of something. When I go there, I'm not just an onlooker, a tourist, that because of my connection with FAI through FAI UK, I feel I'm part of something. I'm making a difference in a very small way. So that's deeply satisfying.
So what in particular do you like about being a trustee of FAI UK?
Well, I've got to know a lot of Italians who know a lot more than I do about art and architecture, so that's an enormous plus. We go on wonderful trips, and so we travel with Italians in Italy, and I've begun to get to know some of the wonderful properties. And you and I were meant to be going on a road trip this spring, weren't we, Alessandra? So that I can actually see a lot of the properties, and I'm sure I'll find a lot of new favourites when we do eventually do our wonderful trip.
So I'm curious to know what your favorite FAI property is, if you have one.
Ooh, I love the Villa Necchi, as you know, in Milan. It's very elegant, Art Deco. But I think one of the great lunches of my life was on the terrace of the Villa dei Vescovi. That was on a FAI UK trip, Aperol in the sun, and it was magnificent.
Well, we go back again there soon. Well, thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for your support and for your enthusiasm for FAI's work. Thank you very much, and I hope you will enjoy our tour today.
Ci vediamo.
Okay, ci vediamo. So here we go with the Grand Tour visits to FAI properties from the comfort of your sofa. And here's our theme song. Okay, so let's start our second virtual visit dedicated to landscape properties. You may not know this, but FAI not only restores villas, as we have seen in our last appointment, but also protects an invaluable patrimony of landscape. Think, for example, of the Cinque Terre, the Tuscan Hills, the Amalfi Coast. Italy has a priceless heritage that deserves to be secured. As of today, FAI is protecting almost 7 million square meters of landscape, pastures, and gardens, which we preserve for present and future generations. Construction in Italy has reached, as I think everywhere, a very high rate. Imagine that during our last year alone, land consumption reached an average of 16 hectares per day, and that is equivalent to 21 soccer fields. That is 2 square meters of natural land lost forever every second. And these are data from the 2020 report of the Italian Institute for Environmental Protection and Research. So as you can imagine, after lockdown, and I guess it was universally true, we all had one desire: to spend time in beautiful open spaces, green areas, and enjoy nature. If we could add some cultural visits, even better. And this made our landscape properties very attractive as soon as they reopened. In fact, in the summer months, some properties had up to 77% of attendance increase versus 2019. So an incredibly successful one is Parco Villa Gregoriana near Rome in Tivoli, which will be our first wheelchair tour today. So let's see a video to have an idea of what we're going to visit. Very nice images. Well, Villa Gregoriana is among the first few properties that have been given on concession to FAI. We entered into an agreement in 2002 with a demanio, literally the state property. It is in fact property of the Italian state, but given to FAI to restore and manage. We already renewed this concession once, and it is now for FAI to manage until 2029, and hopefully even more. So other FAI properties, for example, belong to regions or provinces, like we will see later on. Archaeology and nature here merge, and in the 19th century made it a must-see destination of the Grand Tour for artists, writers, and men of culture. It was the most popular subject in the paintings portraying Tivoli. Woods, trails, Roman ruins, natural caves, and the second highest waterfall in Italy still make it to this day an impressive excursion. Here's a short story of the place. In 1832, Pope Gregory XVI commissioned an impressive work of hydraulic engineering in order to contain the floods of the river Aniene. The stream was then deviated with the subsequent creation of an impressive waterfall of 120 meters, almost 400 feet. It was the Pope who created the park, which still bears its name today. It became then the property of the state after World War II, gradually shifting into a state of abandonment and instability. When FAI embarked on this project after decades of neglect, there was this sign at the entrance, which is coming up. It will pretty soon. Well, 5 tons of rubbish that obstructed the waterfall were taken away after 3 years of work, and the park reopened to the public in 2005. I think we're stuck with unfortunately, with the slides. So I'm asking my colleague if they can go up a few slides. We'll go on, maybe we'll see them later. Let's see if they're coming back. That was the sign that was at the entrance when we received the property to restore. And this was the rubbish. 5 tons of rubbish were taken away. So today, visitors can walk in the most luxuriant greenery, walk through the old trails, discover the 74 tree species found in the park, explore interesting relics of past eras. Among these, the highlights are the remains of the villa of the Roman consul Manius Vopiscus, a sumptuous residence celebrated by statues, and the Roman temples on the Acropolis, which include the renowned Temple of Vesta. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Giorgia Montesano, property manager of Parco Villa Gregoriana, who will guide us in a virtual visit across a few landscape properties.
Alessandra, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Hello, thank you, Giorgia, for joining us. So I want to ask you a few questions, and I know you've been working at Parco Villa Gregoriana for 10 years now. Before we begin our virtual tours, I would like our guests to know more about what it means to be a property manager of a site like this one. What are the challenges? What is the most satisfying aspect of your work, if there is any?
Well, it's not too easy to explain it because Parco Villa Gregoriana is not simply my workplace, but it's basically my second home, as is it where I spend most of my time. So my main task is to take care to it. And in Parco Villa Gregoriana, that means to maintain a fragile balance between the human hand and nature. We are in a romantic garden built in a gorge. The big challenge here is to earn enough money to cover all the costs, maintenance at first, and at the same time to create to offer responding to the needs of hospitality and accessibility by the visitors. So my great pleasure is seeing always a growing number of visitors, more and more people. And it's really nice to hear in the words of the guests that we are working well and are giving nice immersion to those who come to visit us.
So let's start a virtual tour of this park. What is the typical path that a visitor follows once they enter the park?
Well, Parco Villa Gregoriana is a karst gorge and essentially an artificial garden. Between 1832 and 1854, thanks to the Roman architect Clemente Folchi, the villa was built on the chasm of Daniene River, following the guidelines of the English landscape architecture. So there's a main path connecting the two sides of the gorge, along which you may reach at first the artificial waterfall and then the ruins of Roman villa described by Papinius Statius. In his book, Le Silve, the poet describes the villa made up of two buildings just beside the river. Then the path starts to go down in the famous Valley of Hell, up to a sinkhole, the Siren's Cave, in which the river disappears underground. Then you cross a natural bridge, the so-called clearing of Ponte Lupo, Wolf Bridge, by which it's possible to see the dramatic swirling signs of water erosion. This is the lowest point of the park, where at one time the original waterfall dominated the valley floor. From here, we climb back along the suggestive Neolithic gallery, which was carved into the rock. This gallery took its name from the French general who commissioned it while he was stationed in Rome during the period of Napoleonic domination at the beginning of the 1800s. It served to provide an easy way for a visitor to reach the Neptune's Cave. This cave, just like the Siren's one, was formed by the waters of Daniene. Here, the water rushes down into the Valley of Hell and on, down to the Siren's Cave. The travelers of the Grand Tour describe it as at once breathtaking and terrifying. At last, we arrive at the ancient Tiburtine Acropolis, dominated by two temples, built high up on the left-hand side of the river. The temples, being so close to the terrifying and dangerous water of Daniene, also served as a plea to the divinities, the Sibyl Leucotea and the city's founder, Tiburno, to save the city from a water fate. Even today, Alessandra, the Acropolis offers a unique landscape.
It is beautiful. So what type of, do you organize different types of visits for different types of public?
Yes, of course. Parco Villa Gregoriana is a natural, historical and archaeological monument. So we base our offer starting by the genius loci, the spirit of the place, and visitors are enchanted by our storytelling, a sacred woodland, the abundant archaeological sites full of with history, the spectacular gorge of the park itself that show nature at its finest, but legend and myth, and the most fascinating for the travelers.
So I was thinking this was a very unusual year, right? Typically in the spring, I know you would be working very hard in the ordinary maintenance of the park, and this year it was impossible because nobody could get in it. So it was closed all throughout the entire lockdown. So how did you find the park when you reopened?
Well, many areas were reclaimed by nature. The gardening crew had to work hard to recover the original shape, and they are still going on. Fortunately, early in the year, we did some work that helped us to avoid any possibility of damage.
So, in what kind of events do you organize in the after the reopening in the summer?
Well, we initially proceed cautiously. People were back from 3 months of lockdown, and we had to understand what these visitors wanted, their orientation to the visit. So bearing in mind the keywords of this time, distancing from others, security, safety, at last serenity and entertainment, we have organized special visits for small groups in which they could have special experiences. For example, starting in the evening dusk, we lead visitors in the Valley of Hell with an headlamp to light up the way, reliving the emotion of the Grand Tour visitors. The visit finished on the Acropolis terraces where people had dinner. Otherwise, we let people lay down on the grass, looking at the sky and watching the stars with an astronomer.
Well, it seems fantastic. What a shame I live so far and I couldn't be there. Now, we leave Rome. Imagine there is a transporter beam that takes us in an instant to southern Sicily. And we find ourselves at the Giardino della Colimbetra, a lavishing garden within the Valley of the Temples in Agrigento. Here's a short video I'd like you to watch. Well, the Giardino della Colimbetra is located inside the Valley of the Temples. There should be a slide where, so you can understand, there's an aerial view of the valley. In the green circle, you will see the entire Valley of the Temples, and in the red circle, the garden. Okay, it's really a shaded corner of paradise where we can find centuries-old olive trees. It's famous for its agrumeto, a garden of citrus fruits that were planted 3,000 years ago and which still flood the Valley of the Temples with their fragrances. In addition, we can also find trees of pistachios, myrto, and imagine that, bananas. You will agree with me, Colimbetra is a little bit an unusual word. In Greek, it indicates a type of water pool used by Romans for water games. This garden was the first property for which we entered, in fact, into an agreement with a public entity. And here, this time, it was with the Sicilian region back in 1999. Like Villa Gregoriana, it had been abandoned for decades because it was simply too difficult to work in it. So here you can see some photos of how the garden was before FAI's restoration in 1999 and then 2001, and after a few years. As it often happens, FAI interviewed those people who had worked in it previously to do a census of what there was, and then replant what was missing with the original methods and traditional means. It is an exceptional garden that has become productive again in 2016. It produces even oranges. In fact, you can also go and pick your own when you visit, with which we make marmalade that you can find in our bookshops. But the importance of this garden is also historical, because it is an archaeological park where nature is merged with history. Again, here, just like in Villa Gregoriana. FAI's restoration allows us to visit the temple of Hefesto and some hypogeums, as you saw in the video. And in recent years, the garden has seen a significant increase in the number of visitors. In 2013, we only had 25,000 per year, and now we almost reached 60,000 last year. And that placed the garden among the top 5 visited FAI properties. But let's ask Georgia a few more questions about this property also. What is a typical visit to this garden like?
Alessandra, generally guided tours, botanical walks with a picnic in the garden, and of course the food is prepared by local farmers, music events, and excursion in the Greek underground tank.
There should have been some more photos, right? It was a summer of great events, also at the Giardino della Colimbetra. Can you give us some ideas about what was organized here by our colleagues?
Yeah, of course, there was a type of event which really had an unexpected success. The aperitif at twilight. The garden became a popular place to relax and rest, a place in which visitors may feel at home, being in a marvelous and unique place. And what about wine and food? We are in Sicily.
Well, before we move on to another region, I wanted to tell you about our last project here at this garden. After a long negotiation with the authorities and the owners, FAI was able to acquire some houses which will serve as a visitor information center. And finally, we managed to purchase several rustic buildings built in tough stone, which you can see in these pictures. And where we will be able to tell the story of the garden, and we can welcome students and organize educational workshops. These 3 buildings, abandoned for decades, are as you can see, in a very poor state of abandonment and conservation, and are surrounded by 60,000 square meters of land. Like all FAI's restoration, these works will be aimed at preserving the uniqueness of these buildings, respecting their rural and historical character. The project will also pay the maximum attention to environmental sustainability, so it will be crucial to look for innovative solutions for waste disposal and energy self-maintenance of these buildings, respecting the archaeological and landscape constraints of the Valley of the Temples. The first phase of the work have started last year for the most urgent operations for securing these buildings, which are on top of a cliff. The actual restoration project will be carried out for the next 2-3 years as soon as the funds will be secured. So if you fell in love with this garden, don't hesitate to let us know. And now let's continue to visit another property, the Baia di Gheranto, located directly in front of the sea stacks of Capri. And here's a short video. Well, makes you feel like wanting to go swimming, right? Well, the Yeranto Bay is really a natural, beautiful home to the sirens. In fact, according to Pliny the Elder, it was precisely here that Ulysses encountered them on his way back to Ithaca, as recounted by Homer in the Odyssey. It has an industrial past. It was a limestone quarry that fell into disuse in the 1950s and was donated to FAI by Italsider in 1987 when Romano Prodi was its president, so that it would not be subject to the danger of speculation. After the donation to FAI, the bay has undergone substantial environmental interventions geared towards reinstating the original Mediterranean maquis of rosemary, euphorbia, and juniper. Today, it is recognized as a state of importance at a European level and is included within the marine protected area of Punta Campanella. Moreover, its high level of biodiversity makes it an ideal destination for those who like to come into contact with uncontaminated nature, also by engaging in stimulating, enjoyable experiences such as bird watching, kayaking, and snorkeling, as well as botanical strolls and even workshops for children. I want to go back to Georgia. Like Villa Gregoriana, this is another property where ordinary maintenance is very important. Can you give us an idea about the costs of such maintenance?
Yeah, the Yeranto Bay is on a rocky promontory just on the sea. Here, as in Parco Villa Gregoriana, the main problems are related to rain or generally natural elements. So the gardeners had to pay particular attention to path and walls, especially the dry stone wall that in the bay support the terraces with olive trees. In the photos you may see, the wall has collapses, and so workers had to restore it with drywall techniques. Also the sea, simply with waves or as well, causes damage to the structures. Generally, landscape properties cost every year about 500,000 euro, excluding extraordinary maintenances.
Well, and this confirms us to all the need to search for funds in order to maintain and protect our landscape treasures for the future. So I have some more pictures, some noble photographs that were taken at the Baia di Yeranto. I wanted to show you. It was taken in 2008. Prince Charles was visiting Naples and heard about this bay and asked to visit it. He arrived in helicopter, walked throughout the entire property with our custodian Salvatore. You saw him, he was in the video as well. We even had the possibility to offer some local homemade food, which he enjoyed very much. And since the time was short, then he embarked with some sfogliatelle, which you see on the right with him, because he could not resist. Well, thank you, Giorgia, for sharing your experience with us and for taking us on these beautiful tours.
You're welcome, and thank you all for your support and patronage. I hope to see you soon in Parco Villa Gregoriana. Bye.
Bye-bye, Giorgia. Thank you.
Bye.
Now, I would like to ask Amanda Kadner, Executive Director of Friends of FAI New York, to also add a few words if she can connect. Are you here, Amanda? Can you hear me? I cannot hear you. Hello? Amanda? We seem to have some technical problems tonight, and I apologize. Everything was working just fine when we were testing, of course. Well, let's give Amanda a few more seconds if she can. Here she is. Hello, Amanda. Now I can see you, and can I hear you? We cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Well, there's something that is not working back in New York. I'm sure she wanted to say how much she is happy to see you, and I guess it'll be for next time. Okay, thank you, Amanda. So I want to take this opportunity here to thank all our donors and supporters for their generous help during this difficult year. Remember that it is possible to donate to FAI and Friends of FAI, and donations are tax deductible. Any help you may give does make a difference. You can see there's a slide with our websites and contact emails. This should be visible also in the chat. I'm asking my colleagues to put all these addresses and contact details in the chat. You can also visit our properties or hire them for venues for a special event. And you can find all the necessary information on fondoambiente.it, visit FAI. So we have come to the end of our event. We're looking forward to seeing you on our next visit entitled Abbeys and Monasteries with Daniela Bruno, Deputy Director for Cultural Affairs, who will guide us to the discovery of the Abbazia di San Fruttuoso near Portofino, the Abbazia di Cerrate in Lecce in the Apulia region, and the Monastero di Torba near Milan. I want now to send a video with some images of other green properties, gardens, alpine pastures, protected woodland in the care of FAI. It would give you a comprehensive view of our efforts in this field. It would also, it lasts only a couple of minutes, and I want to invite you all to a little game. Try to guess the names of the properties before they come up on screen, okay? Thank you all for attending and staying with us. I wish you all a good afternoon and a good evening, and ci vediamo.